I'm sorry to anyone who tuned in right at 10 o'clock. I'm not super savvy with computers or technology, and I rarely use Facebook, so I started streaming from the wrong page. Now I'm on the correct page, so sorry about that to anyone who may have missed anything. I will just start from the beginning, I guess. So my name's Leslie. I'll be teaching yoga today. It'll be a pretty gentle class, but as always, if we come across anything that you don't like or doesn't feel comfortable, you can feel free to swap it out for something else or just skip it and rejoin later. But we'll get started. We'll start in a standing position. We'll start with our eyes closed, our palms facing forward. And we'll start to lift up our chest and press the feet into the earth. And from here we'll just start to deepen our breath, taking bigger, slower breaths in and out. Slowly increasing the size of the breaths we're taking. It might be helpful to bring the hands to the chest or the stomach and feel the body fill up with air and empty of air. And make the next inhale you take the biggest breath that you've taken so far. And once you've taken a really big breath, holding the breath for just a few seconds, and seeing what it feels like to be full of air, and then emptying the breath. Holding there, seeing what it feels like to be empty of air. Then letting the breath return to normal. We'll start to open the eyes, and we'll start to make some semicircles with our neck, our head. So allowing the head to drop over to one side, down, and then forward. And then over to the other side. And going back and forth a few times in both directions. Eventually making these a complete circle. With the head dropping back and around. Reversing directions. And eventually come to stillness. We'll start to make some circles with the shoulders. So we'll squeeze the shoulders up towards our ears. And then we'll let them drop down and back. Eventually coming back around to the front, up towards the ears again, down and back. Eventually reversing the direction. Might feel good to do one shoulder at a time. Eventually slowing that motion down. We'll take the feet a little wider apart and we'll place the hands on the hips and we'll start to make circles with our hips. Going slowly at first. And noticing if we meet any resistance doing this. And eventually changing directions if you haven't already. Eventually coming to stillness. We'll take a moment here to just get some energy moving through our body to get our heart rate up. So you're free to do something along the lines of shaking the body or bouncing up and down. You're also free to do something more structured than that. Maybe you want to jog in place or do jumping jacks. But we will just take the next minute or two to choose some activity like that and just stick with it for a few moments. And if you get halfway through and you don't like the activity you picked, you can feel free to bounce around from jogging to shaking, whatever feels good for you today. So we'll get started. I'm going to choose shaking and bouncing because it's my favorite. But choose whatever you like. And we're still breathing here. You can start off slowly and eventually ramp up to a more intense, faster motion. Another minute. And if you haven't gone really quickly or moved in a really intense fashion, if your heart isn't beating very quickly, just really ramp up whatever motion you picked, whatever running or jumping jacks or shaking. Just take a few moments to really be intense with it. And we'll eventually start to slow that motion down. You don't have to stop all at once. We'll Eventually land ourselves in empty coat sleeves. So just moving the torso and letting the arms be moved along with it. Eventually coming to stillness. We'll take a moment in that pose we started in again. Transitioning from motion to stillness. Pressing the feet into the ground, taking a deep breath in and out. And just taking a moment to notice the feeling of stillness as compared to the feeling of a lot of motion. And we'll open the eyes, we'll take an inhale, we'll sweep the arms up and overhead, we'll exhale, and the hands will meet in front of the heart. And we'll take a few more breaths like that with the arms going up and over, and then towards the heart. And we'll find stillness again. We'll take the legs out wide apart. We'll put a bend in the knees here. And the toes can point out to the sides. And from here, we'll just sink down and rise back up a few times. And keep your arms bent in goddess pose, and extend them when you reach the top for five-pointed star. Inhaling as we reach up and out, and exhaling as we come back down. We'll pause when we get back to the top. We'll take the hands to the hips again. We'll keep a very straight back, and you can put a bend in your knees if you need to. And we'll fold forward, wide-legged forward fold. Letting the arms reach towards the earth, or maybe you grab opposite elbows, or maybe you keep your hands on your hips. We're allowing the top half of the body to just hang upside down. Releasing any tension in our faces, in the jaw, in the temples. And you make a couple of funny faces to help you do that. Maybe you find a little bit of motion in the hips and in the torso here, upside down. We'll take an inhale, we'll bring the hands towards the earth. We'll come to a flat back. And we'll do this on either side, so it doesn't matter which side you do first, just make sure you do it on both sides. We'll take one hand to the center of our body, and the opposite hand will go up towards the sky, twisting open. Inhaling here, and on the exhale, coming back down, and twisting to the other side. we'll take a few more of those on each side. And taking your last twist on either side, we'll return to that flat back position and we'll come all the way up. And from here, we'll bend the knees again, back into that goddess position with our legs. And we'll start to move from side to side, straightening one leg and then the other leg. There's also the option to do this with our hands on the ground, walking the hands from side to side, straightening one leg and then the other. We'll eventually come to stillness. We'll find our way back up to standing. We'll set up for a balance pose. So we'll be coming into dancer. And again, it doesn't matter which side you choose to start on. So I'll start on my left. I'll take my left leg up into my left hand. So balancing on my right foot, making sure I feel stable in that right foot. And then I'll take my right arm up. Incorporating the upper body, lifting the chest, relaxing the shoulders. And when you feel ready, if you feel ready, coming forward, reaching the fingertips out, kicking that foot into the hand that's holding it. And slowly, gracefully bring that back down. And setting up for the same pose on the opposite side. Pressing into the foot that's going to support you. Making sure that foot is ready. And bringing up the opposite leg, grabbing it with a hand, reaching up and forward, and pressing that back foot into the hand, reaching out through the fingertips, reaching out through your chest. And eventually, slowly, gracefully coming back down. And from here, we'll find our way into a downward facing dog. So taking hands and feet to the mat, pressing hips up and backward. And it might feel good to find some motion here in your legs, in your feet, and in your hips. So we'll take some time to stretch out the back of the legs and the ankles. Really relax your neck and head. from here, we'll do a little bit of balancing. So taking the left foot up and off the mat, we'll kick it towards the back of the room. We'll inhale. We won't let it touch the ground, we'll just hover. We'll bring that knee in almost like between the arms or towards the chest. We'll send it back out again. Still breathing here. We'll bring the knee in between the arms. We'll send it back up again. We'll bring it in between the arms one more time. One last breath. We'll send it out and back. And we'll let it drop down to where the other leg is. And we'll drop down into child's pose. So knees wide apart, palms on the mat, toes together, head and neck relax. Shoulders relax. Take a big breath in, try to direct air into the back of the body. And a big exhale. We'll come back into downward facing dog. This time we'll work with the other leg. So lifting that leg. A leg you did not just use up and off of the ground. Kicking it backwards, growing it nice and long. We'll bring that leg in between the arms. We'll press it out again. Bringing the knee in again, breathing along with this motion. Pressing the leg out. Bringing the knee in one more time. And pressing the leg out one more time. We'll slowly bring it down. And we'll find that child's pose one more time. Taking a few deep breaths into the area in between the shoulders, on the back. You can take all the time you need to remain in child's pose or come out of it, and we'll meet in table pose. So we'll have our knees on the floor for a good amount of this next part. So if you have a blanket or a cushion, now is a great time to use it. So we'll come into the table pose, we'll come onto all fours. In table pose, you want your arms and legs to have lots of right angles. So you want your knees lined up right under your hips. You want your elbows and wrists lined up right under your shoulders. It's always good to check for that if you're in table pose. And from here, we'll come into cat and cow. So taking a deep breath in, lifting the head, lifting the tailbone, pressing into the mat with the hands and feet. And on the exhale, dropping the head down, dropping the tailbone down, curving the back in the opposite direction, emptying out the breath. And continuing with that motion at your own pace. Working on this motion, allowing this motion to become seamless. So it's more like one pose instead of two poses. One motion. the option to stay with cat and cow, or find other motions in your spine, maybe side to side. You curve your spine, or just any other movements in the shoulders or spine or hips that might feel good. Anything that you feel compelled to do. You'll eventually come to stillness again, still in table pose. We'll extend one arm forward and the opposite leg back. I'll start with my left arm forward and my right leg back. Reaching out through the fingertips, reaching out through the toes, growing the body nice and long, pressing into the mat, using your core to support you. We'll take a big inhale here, and we'll exhale and allow that arm and leg to drop back down. And we'll lift the opposite arm and leg, reaching out through the foot, reaching out through the hand, pressing down into the mat to lift yourself up. Growing nice and long once again. We'll take a big breath in, and we'll allow that hand and foot to drop back down onto the mat. If your wrists get tired in this position, you're welcome to make fists on the mat instead, and support yourself using the backs of your hands or your knuckles. From here, we'll work with the legs. Again, I'll start with my left side, and I'll turn so perhaps you can see a bit better what I'm doing. So I'm taking my left leg, reaching it out, growing it nice and long, supporting myself with my hands and my right leg. I'll allow the toes to drop onto the mat, and just sort of bouncing, extending through the heel. Eventually, I'll allow my left foot to jump over my right, and I'll turn the front half of my body to look at that foot. So the foot is still on the mat, the leg is still extended. And from here, I'll take an inhale, bringing that foot out to the left side of my body. And walking my hands over to the right, I'll come into a side plank with my knee down, my arm extended upward. Taking a few breaths here. I'll allow my hand to come back down, that leg to come back in, and back in table pose. So we'll do that same sequence again on the opposite side. Whatever leg you did not use the first time, we'll use this time around. So I'm taking an inhale, reaching the right leg very far back, growing it nice and long, and allowing the toes to touch the mat. We'll stretch out the back of the leg. Take an inhale, lifting the leg up again. I'll send that leg over the opposite leg. It'll cross over the opposite leg. And you'll turn your gaze to look at the foot of the extended leg. We'll do a cycle of breath here, and that leg will reach out to the side, and our hands will walk over to the opposite side, Again, we'll take that side plank with the knee down. Take a nice full breath here, and eventually we'll bring ourselves back to table pose. Feel free to vary what your legs are doing if they become tired in these poses. You can feel free to sit on your heels or find other alternatives for things to do with your legs if they get stressed being in this pose for a long time. And so we're still in table for just a bit longer. In our table pose, we'll take one hand to the center of the mat, and the opposite hand will go up and overhead. We're twisting open to the side. On the exhale, the fingertips will come back down. They'll brush the ground and they'll come back up one more time. Inhaling, exhaling, back down. And they'll reach up one last time. Throwing that arm nice and long, feeling nice and supported by the legs and the hand that's still on the mat. We'll bring that arm back down and we'll thread it underneath the other arm. Bringing the shoulder down to the mat, bringing the head down to the mat. And we'll take a few breaths here. Just try to find a spot in this position where you're able to find some sense of relaxation, peacefulness. And if you know some variation or your body feels compelled to do something different, wrap your arm around or extend your leg or something like that, don't hesitate to take that variation. We'll eventually bring ourselves back up, reaching up one last time and landing ourselves back into table pose. We'll do that same thing on the opposite side now. So I started with my left, this time I'll use my right hand. Reaching up, twisting open, exhaling, allowing the hand to come back down, reaching up, again, allowing the hand to come back down, reaching up one last time, and on the exhale, threading that arm underneath the other arm. And again, just finding somewhere where you can be in this pose without straining to hold yourself up. Take an inhale, we'll unthread that arm, we'll reach it all the way back up one last time, and we'll come back into table pose. From here, still in table pose, we'll take the legs out a little wider. We're still on our knees, we'll take the legs out wider, and we'll start to allow the toes of the feet to point out to either side. And we'll come down onto the forearms. It might feel good to have palms together on the mat, and it might feel good to have palms flat on the mat, so it's your choice. We're coming into frog pose. So you want your legs a decent width apart. You want your elbows on the mat. And once you're here, we'll start to draw the hips towards the feet. So drawing the hips back. And in this pose, it's usually pretty quick and obvious when your body wants you to stop. So you don't need to be in complete stillness. You can move in and out of the pose. It is important to keep breathing. We're just noticing what happens in our hips. It does not seem to be a very involved pose, but it can have a lot going on, a lot of intensity. It can be a lot of work even though it's not very complicated looking. On your next inhale, we'll start to support ourselves with the hands, and we'll find ourselves in a seated position. And you can take any kind of counter pose that you might need. Take a moment to shake out your legs. Anything you feel you might need to do after that pose to release that pose. And we'll just take the legs out in front of us, feet flat on the floor. We'll keep a bend in our knees, and we'll allow the knees to drop from one side to the other. And the next time your knees have dropped over to one side, you'll take the upper half of the body and starting to twist toward that same side. You'll use the hands to support yourself. You might take your gaze behind you. Breath in here and then breath out. And we'll start to move that twist to the other side. Big inhale, big exhale. And we'll come back into a neutral position. And we'll allow ourselves to come onto the back. Our soles of our feet will touch. And we'll lay on the back, butterfly pose. Big inhale here, and a big exhale. And from here, we'll start to bring the feet up overhead. You can keep a bend in the legs and use your hands to support them if you need to. Or you can just send the legs up. Start to find some motion in the toes and make some circular motions with the ankles. Trying again to do things evenly on both sides of the body as much as possible. Trying to feel everything that there is to feel and move everything that there is to move in the toes and the ankles. Eventually we'll put a bend in the legs. We'll bring our hands to the top of the knees and we'll start to make circles out of the hips. And also bring the hands to the back of the knees if you need to. And you can move the legs in unison, or you can move them separately or in opposite directions. We're just making some circles in the ball and socket joint that's in our hip. trying to be even with both sides of our body. And eventually, placing both feet flat on the ground with the knees bent. We'll do one more thing before coming to stillness. So I'll start with my left leg up in the air, and you can either keep the opposite leg bent and on the floor like we started, or you can extend it. If it's extended, you need to keep both feet flexed. It's important. So my extended leg in the air, we'll just start to point and flex those toes. So sending the toes away from the body and then drawing the toes back towards the body and sending the heel away from the body instead. We'll do a few flexes and points with this foot, trying to match up what you're doing with your breath. Eventually, we'll squeeze that leg in, hugging it into the body. And bringing it back into more of a right angle in that knee. We'll allow that leg to jump over the opposite leg. So flipping the hips over, coming into sort of a twist. You want to keep your shoulders, your upper body mostly on the ground still. And we'll just use the hands to lift that leg back up. Knees still bent. We'll allow it to drop out to the side. We'll take a breath here. We'll hug that knee in one last time. We'll flex both feet. We'll hug the elbows in, really tightening up everything one last time. All the muscles in the legs, the abs, the neck, the face, the shoulders. Tighten up everything. Tighten up both butt cheeks. Tighten up the shins. Tighten up the biceps. And if you're tightening up absolutely everything I just listed, now you have to smile. Take an inhale here, and on the exhale, we'll send that leg back up into the air, and we'll either press out through the toes or through the heel. You have the option to do either one. And in super slow motion, we'll allow that leg to come all the way back down to the ground. And we'll take a few breaths here in stillness to sort of compare the legs, compare the leg that just did all that stuff to the leg that did not do any of that stuff, and just see what we feel, what's different. Was there any benefit to doing that? And then the opposite leg. Just squeeze in. We'll bring it over the hips. Flipping the hips onto their side, letting one leg come over the other. And a twist. Taking a breath here will help that leg back up and allow it to drop over to the other side, still bent. Taking a breath here. We'll squeeze that leg back in. We'll send it back up, pointing and flexing the toes, matching up that motion with your breath. And when you feel ready, drawing that leg super duper long, either pressing out through the heel or pressing out through the toes, and going in slow motion, allowing that leg to very slowly reach the earth. And once it is there, again, taking a moment to notice the legs, notice what they're doing. Notice if there's any new awareness in them, if they feel tired, if they feel better. Just checking in with what's going on. And any last motions your body might feel like it wants to do. Now is a great opportunity to take any other positions that you feel like you need to take. I invite you to just take a few more slow, deep breaths. Filling the body completely with air and emptying the body completely of air. On the next breath you take, really expanding the lungs, the chest, the collarbone, the belly. Make it the biggest breath you've taken all day. When you have taken that breath in, try to sip in just a little bit more air. And try to hold the breath for just a moment. Seeing what it feels like when everything is expanded and full of air. And on the exhale, making sure to fully empty everything. And holding in that position, seeing what the belly and the chest feel like, what the back feels like when your body is empty of air. Just a moment. And then letting your breathing return to normal. If you've gotten really relaxed, you can slowly start to open your eyes and make your way back up. It is just about 11 o'clock today, so that's all the time I have to share with everyone who joined. And I'd just like to use the last few moments to say thanks to anyone who was watching and made the effort to practice today. You're very appreciated. Thank you.